Visvak, do we want to start? There's about 20 people, I think. No, 16 people in the group.
Uh, cool. Yeah, we could get started. Or do you want to wait 5 minutes to see if more people are?
Sure, we'll wait another 5 minutes. So hello to everyone who's already joined. We'll just wait for another 5 minutes before Visvak starts with his presentation. Thank you. Hi to everyone joining. We're just going to begin in a few minutes, still waiting for some people to join. So thank you for waiting. Okay, I'll just
Okay.
introduce you first, Visvak, if that's okay.
Sorry?
I'll just introduce you first.
Okay. Yeah, sure.
Well, hello everyone. Thank you for joining. This is the first session that Freelance Writers India is organizing. We're hoping to do more on different topics in the future. So if there's some specific things that you would like to learn about or want more dialogue on, please DM us. We're available on Twitter. Our handle is FWIOPPS. So thank you to Hubly Events for coordinating this webinar. So today we have Visvak with us. He's a journalist with experience in print and digital mediums as an editor and a reporter. He's written for The Hindu, Wire, Huffington Post, BuzzFeed, and other publications. He's also on Twitter. His handle is VISVAK. Yeah. So you'll get to learn about the basics of pitching from Visvak. If you have any questions for him at any point, do put it in the Q&A box that's there in Zoom, and I'll take it up at the end of his presentation. So yeah, over to you, Visvak.
Okay, cool. Thank you. Thank you all for inviting me to talk to you, and also everyone who's tuned in. Thank you for turning up. Yeah. So yeah, my name is Visvak, and I'm a journalist. I've been a freelancer for, everyone can hear me, right? Before I ramble on.
Okay.
Cool. So I've been a freelancer for just over 3 years now. Before that, I was a commissioning editor at the BuzzFeed and at Hindu. So because of that, I know what it feels like to send off pitches into the void, wondering when I'll ever hear back, probably never hearing back. And I also know what it feels like to walk into office on Monday morning to an inbox, that's stuffed, overflowing with pitches, most of which are going to get rejected for no good reason. So hopefully I can combine, insights from both of these opposing perspectives and in this talk, and kind of help you increase your odds of making it out of that editor's inbox and onto the website or page, whichever it is. So the workshop, the talk is basically a basic guide to pitching as a freelance writer. So it isn't going to tell you how to write the perfect pitch. I'm still trying to figure that out myself. So yeah, if you're already familiar with the basics of the process, this might not be as helpful to you. So in addition to talking about pitching, I'm also going to be talking about the basics of negotiating payments and getting paid, because I feel like that's an integral part of the pitching process, and I really couldn't figure out how to separate the two. So yeah, we'll touch on that a little bit. Yeah, and yeah, as we mentioned earlier, if you have any questions at any point during the presentation, just put it into the chat box or take a note, and we can discuss it at the end. Cool. I'm gonna try and share my screen now. Can everyone see that?
Yep.
All right, cool. Let's go. Yes, the basics of pitching and getting paid as a freelance writer. Okay, so first up, I have to give you some disclaimers, some clarifications. My experience is primarily with features journalism. So all my examples and my advice are going to be related to that. So if you're trying to break into a different kind of writing, your mileage might vary slightly. Secondly, I'm not an expert at this stuff. Whatever I'm going to tell you is what I've figured out through my own experiences, my struggles. I would say that following whatever advice I have to offer, the benefit would be that you don't have to reinvent the wheel. You can just kind of follow the path that I've laid out, and it will kind of help accelerate the process of getting started. And so it's what I might tell you is definitely not the only way to do things. There's probably 100 other approaches that might work as well. So this might be useful as a baseline to start from which you can go on and build your own ideas. Cool. So with that out of the way, let's get started. So pitching 101. So freelance writing isn't just about writing. So if you're a great writer, that's fantastic. That's a bonus. But you can make it even if you're just an adequate writer. What's far more important than being a great writer is doing your homework on publications. So editors are overworked and underpaid, just like freelancers. And often they're trying to make choices that don't have any good answers, like, there are two pitches which are equally good and you have to pick one. So there's often no good answer to that choice. So as a freelancer, the key to success, in my opinion, is to make the editor's job as easy as possible. And the way to do that is, well, to do your homework before pitching. Um, so I'm going to get into that now. Um, so yeah, step one to the pitching process, I would say, is to read widely and to deconstruct. Now, the read widely part is, well, basic advice to all writers. If you can't, if you don't read a lot, you probably are going to struggle with writing. So yeah, that's obvious. But there's a difference between reading to consume, reading passively, and reading actively to deconstruct things. So and that process, that deconstruction, is, in my opinion, the key to figuring out what a publication wants, and by figuring that out, you make it easier for yourself to give them what they want. So how exactly do you go about doing this deconstruction? So there's a way to read when you're looking to deconstruct, and that's slowly, with a lot of attention to detail and taking a ton of notes. So there's a bunch of aspects to look out for when you're looking to read to deconstruct. The most obvious one is style. So, and this is something we all tend to notice even when we're reading passively, right? But yeah, when you pay more attention, you can try and figure out what sentences or paragraphs specifically are working for you in a piece that you already like. What are they? What kind of structural elements are they using? The kind of introduction and conclusion, how they communicate dialogue, how they highlight characters, or how they pace a story, or what is the length of the story? How often do they zoom into the specifics before zooming back out into like the broader context? So this is, one second, my phone is ringing. I'm just going to silence it.
Also, to everyone, a recording of this will be shared afterwards. So just in case if you missed anything, if you think you missed anything, don't worry, you'll have the recording later on. Yeah, carry on with Visvak.
Okay, I'm really sorry about that. I've put it on silent now. Yeah, back to where I was. Yeah, so yeah, this is so this kind of looking at style closely can be useful to kind of help you write better in a general way. But more importantly, in this particular context, it can help you understand the way the publication expects its writers to write. For example, you might figure out if a publication values facts and figures over people, or does it dive deep into niches, or does it stay at the surface level? Does it want a lot of color in its writing, or does it prefer, very specific kind of technical details? So yeah, that's something really useful to figure out. Another thing you can look at is what are the standard formats that a publication trades in? Do they mainly publish opinion pieces? Do they mainly publish reportage, personal essays? What is it? Is it dry, short reports, or is it in-depth investigations? So again, these kind of aspects again tell you. A publication might publish all of these kind of pieces, but then you'd have specific sections for each. And then another aspect to look at is, well, I've written size, tone, audience, because all of these kind of things, these three aspects tend to be linked, typically, especially in digital publications. Shorter, lighter content tends to be aimed at a certain kind of audience. Longer, heavier, more in-depth content is aimed at another kind of audience. So you look at these aspects to figure out who is the intended audience. Are they trying to talk to young people? Are they trying to talk to CEOs? Are they trying to do some sort of weird balance where they talk to both. So again, another useful insight to have into a publication. And then important events that you could kind of target. So a lot of publications tend to plan editorial calendars around events. And if you can identify events that might be of interest to a specific publication, then you have a slight edge if you pitch something around that. So for a publication like Live Mint, the day some new financial data is released would be an important date. And if you could pitch something around that, you have slightly higher odds of success. Maybe for a publication like Feminism in India, the anniversary of a landmark feminist moment might be, one such event that you could craft a pitch around. You could also research the writers who are already getting published in these publications. That can give you an additional layer of knowledge. Do they prefer inexperienced writers, young writers, or are they going for like grizzled veterans? If you look at a publication like The Wire, they publish a lot of academics, and they have another space called Live Wire, which seems to be their space for younger writers. So again, helps you target your pitch to the right publication and also to the right section and space within the publication. So the goal with all of these, with this deconstruction, is to try and get a sense of what the thought process is for the publication behind the scenes, what they're trying to, the kind of pieces they're trying to commission and publish. So international publications tend to put out very detailed pitch guidelines that already specify all of these. Indian publications generally don't. So this deconstruction is essentially a process by which you make your own pitch guidelines for a publication that you are kind of focusing on or targeting and you want to try and get published in. So, by the end of this kind of deconstruction process, you should have figured out things like the ideal word length, style of writing, whether it's reported or opinion pieces they prefer, is it breaking or investigation? Are there particular issues or topics that they really focus on? If you figured out these kind of things through this process of deconstructing the publication, then it just becomes a lot easier to pitch to them and get that pitch accepted. Okay, so well, you've passed that stage. Now you have to figure out where the pitch goes. So again, this goes back to the earlier process where you were looking into the publication, and you need to try and identify the specific editor who might be in charge of the section that you want to pitch to. So for smaller publications, typically, it might be a all-round team that handles all pitches. But even for slightly large publications, say you want to pitch to The Wire and you want to pitch a science article, you need to find the science editor. And typically how I would go about this is to look them up on social media. Twitter usually, because that tends to be the preferred medium for most journalists. So I would look up, there are websites that allow you to search for, search Twitter bios. So I would search, The Wire editor, science editor, something like that. And, you would find who the person is who is in charge of that section. And well, usually they either have their DMs open or, their email addresses are listed and you can try and contact them that way. DM etiquette is tricky, but I think it's worth a shot sometimes. Another way you can try to get in touch with them is standard format emails. So usually most established publications tend to have, formats for their staff emails like first name.last name@company.com, or initial dot last name. So yeah, if you really can't turn up an editor's email through Googling and through social media, it's worth giving these kind of standard format email IDs a shot. It does work out on occasion. Another avenue to find places to publish is to look for open calls for pitches on these very social media platforms. So a lot of, again, Indian publications typically don't tend to do this. And even when they do it on a very ad hoc basis. So unless you follow the individual editor, you might not get to know. But a lot of international publications do it. And I have a list of phrases that are commonly used in these calls for pitches. It was compiled by a UK freelancers group called Journo Resources. Great group. I recommend following them. I will share that list with you. I'll just put the link in the chat. So you can plug those phrases into like Twitter search, and they're very useful for searching and like locating existing calls for pitches that have been put out by editors. Yeah, I would really urge you to consider getting on Twitter or whatever social media platform is relevant to your interests. I know for certain kinds of writing, it might be Instagram or LinkedIn, not necessarily Twitter. So whatever it is, that social media platform, and try to talk about your niche, about your interests. Keep tweeting about the subjects that you're tracking. You can also share stuff that doesn't make it into the final piece of writing, or talk about the process of freelancing yourself. So basically what this does is it puts you in a showcase. I know when I was an editor, I commissioned several pieces based on tweets and tweet threads, because I was looking for something on a topic, but I couldn't find the right person for it. And when I read a tweet thread where someone had already argued out like a brilliant opinion on that subject, it was like a no-brainer to just tell them, okay, expand this into a proper piece and I'll pay you. So this can be an avenue to getting commissioned as well. That kind of sidesteps the whole pitching process. Cool. On to the next step, nailing that cold email. So a mistake that a lot of freelancers tend to make, that, well, definitely I made when I first started out, was to think of a pitch as something where I basically communicated the bare bones of the story, some kind of bullet point core ideas, and then I leave the rest to the editor's imagination. Allow them to understand what is the real importance or relevance of the story. Allow them to fill in the gaps, basically. So that's less than optimal approach, I would say. Or at least I've figured out over the years. It's more useful to think of a pitch as a compressed version of your final piece. So you spend a lot of time crafting this pitch, because essentially you are trying to communicate the importance, the relevance of the entire piece in a piece of writing that is perhaps 10% the length of the actual piece itself. So it's actually much harder to write this pitch than it is to write the entire story. And especially, that becomes even more true when you consider the fact that we probably haven't done the full extent of reporting or research yet. So how do you do this? A useful trick or exercise, if you prefer, that I kind of use is to call someone up. It could be a friend, it could be your mom, whoever, and try and communicate the story to them over the phone. And essentially what this does is it forces you to tell the story in a way that holds their attention. It forces you to focus on the most important facts, and it also forces you to kind of make it, grab their attention. And this exercise has really helped me. It also helps with figuring out headlines, because again, it's the same thing going on, where writers, when we write a piece, the assumption is that someone who's reading the piece has some degree of interest already, so they're a bit invested in reading the piece. That assumption is there in every piece of writing, I think. But with this exercise, you shed that assumption. You are basically talking to someone who's essentially uninterested, and you're trying to communicate the story to them in a way that's interesting. So I think that's a great way of arriving at a pitch, that mini version of the final piece. So yeah, essentially I do this exercise, and then I go back and I write down whatever I said. Yeah, so if you manage to hold your friend's attention, you'll probably do okay with the editor as well. So yeah, and a new publication usually means more work on the pitch. If you've managed to write for a publication for a particular amount of time, and you have an established rapport with the editor, then you can probably slide into that format of pitching which I described earlier, just the bare bones, because the editor already understands possibly your capabilities and skills and so on. But with new publications, I would urge you to really spend a lot of time on crafting that mini story. And then, yeah, it's important to also tailor the section of the email where you talk about yourself to speak to the particular story that you're pitching. So I have an engineering background, so I might highlight that if I'm pitching a story about technology. I also have a master's in social sciences. So if I was pitching a story about history, which I'm more focused on right now, then I would mention that. So yeah, fairly obvious. Focus on whatever strengths speak to that pitch. And then, yeah, the final point is to discuss pay. Now, you can either do this in the initial mail. It's totally okay to query the editor saying, please mention when you get back to me what your typical payment rates are, something like that. Or you can hold off until the editor gets back to you, with an initial response, and then the follow-up mail can have that query of, asking them what kind of payment rates do you offer. So we'll get back to that point. I have a whole section that deals with that, but let's go more in depth into that pitch email. So yeah, I've broken it down into 4 sections. I mean, again, this is a rough guide, right? It can help you figure out the very basics of it. So the first section is a brief. I would say no more than 1 or 2 lines. Your name, what you do, where you're based, and very briefly, what is the story that you have in mind. The second section can go a bit more into detail on the story. So I would say this is the core of your pitch, and I would say contain it to 200 words or maybe 300 typically, unless you're writing a really long form research heavy story and you absolutely need it. I would say stick to 200 words or maximum 300. So in this section, you can talk about, what is the story? Why does it matter? Who you can talk to write it. If you've already done some research or if you've already spoken to some people, you can mention that here. Yeah, so this is the section where you really try and explain the importance of the story, and also, offer some facts about what the story is. And then the third section, I would say, is optional. It really depends on whether it's relevant to the story you're pitching. So this is where I would typically talk about, if I need a travel budget to write the story, or if I'm going to work with photo or video or some multimedia elements, something specific, technical, administrative, I would mention this here. And then I would end the email with, the brief earlier on was a very short one where you very quickly mentioned your details. Here I would go more into depth about my profile. So I'd talk about my writing history, my expertise, where my work has been published in the past. Basically, this is the section where you try and convince the editor, I've already sold you on the story. The story sounds great. This is the section where I try and tell you why I am the right person to write the story. So yeah, that covers the basics of pitching. I would say an important thing to remember is to develop like a thick skin, because there's going to be a lot of rejection and being ignored, and there's no real way to avoid that. Also remember, it's totally okay to pitch simultaneously to multiple publications, especially when a story is time sensitive. Well, some writers tend to frown on it, so I would say do it only when a story is time sensitive. So just add an email, a line to your email saying, I'm pitching this story to multiple publications because it needs to go out this week in order to be relevant. So I would appreciate a quick response. You can do that and pitch to multiple publications. That way, you're not waiting on one publication to get back to you before pitching to the next one. By which time the story might have gone stale. And if you're not hearing back at all, I would say typically I wait maybe a week or 10 days, and then I drop in a reminder. And if I haven't heard back in another week or 10 days, I assume I'm not going to hear back. Obviously this is not a hard and fast rule, but that's how I do it. Cool. The next section, I'm going to deal with the getting paid part of the process. The first step is figuring out the right prices to ask for, the right payment rates. So this is, in my experience, a trial and error process. The prices, the typical payment rates vary widely depending on a bunch of factors, ranging from like the publication's expectations to, your own level of desperation. So internationally, what I've managed to figure out is that $1 per word, and when I say internationally, I mean US, UK, because those are the primary English language publishing markets. So there, $1 per word seems to be some kind of gold standard, where if you've made it to that level, you've made it as a writer. In India, that number, the equivalent number to that, in my experience, is about 10 rupees per word. Very few publications pay that much, but it does exist. So, there are other metrics as well for measuring payment. It could be per word, as I've been discussing so far. It could also be time-based, or just a flat fee that, we'll pay you $8,000 for, a 2,000 word essay or something like that. But per word tends to be the most widely used metric. So how I usually approach this process of figuring out what is the right price for a piece is that I have a baseline below which I would not accept a commission, and that's 5 rupees per word for me. And then I have an optimal, ideal, aspirational rate, which is 10 rupees per word. again, very rare to get that. So I usually, yeah, like I said, I would not accept any commissions below the baseline, and anything above the baseline, I'm going to try and negotiate to try and get it closer to the aspirational ideal. Yeah, so that's usually how I navigate it. And it's important to know these numbers, to know what other the value of your writing, not because you have to be rigid and you have to stick to particular rates, but I mean, at the very least, you should know when you're being ripped off. At least, I mean, that's how I see it. Because I really think I mean, this is a huge problem. Like, don't let anyone ever convince you into working for exposure. If you think it's valuable and worth your time to work for free or for a lower price because you believe in a particular cause, that's totally fine. But don't let anyone else make that decision for you or convince you into that. Okay, so you figured out the right price that works for you, or at least you have a goal in mind. How do you get to that goal? So again, going back to my early days of freelancing, I remember a time when I used to pitch, and then if I got a positive response, I would be so overjoyed that I would feel like the editor was doing me a favor and that I was burdening them somehow or doing something wrong by asking, about payment. I don't know if that is relatable to any of you, but really, yeah, you need to be shameless and direct in order to get paid whatever your true worth is. So if an editor gets back to your pitch saying, go ahead, start writing, do not start writing. Ask them what they will pay first. Before you do any actual work, ask them what they're going to pay. So usually publications tend to have a fixed rate, or at least they're going to make it seem like it's a very fixed, very non-negotiable rate, even if it is slightly flexible. So when you query them, what are you going to, what are your typical payment rates? They're going to offer you whatever their standard rate is, or what they deem your value to be. Now, if that doesn't work for you, try and raise it closer to your optimum. So I would typically approach this. This is a tricky thing, because if you editors can get upset if you ask for too much money, or even if you ask for just a little bit of money. So I try to approach this in an open-ended way. So I say, I usually charge around this much. So would that work for you? Or can you get closer to this? So that phrasing it like that leaves some leeway for the editors to come back to you saying, that's too much. Can you settle for this? Or no, we have no room to budge. Just take it or leave it. Whatever the editor chooses to respond with. So a lot of people, when I use this approach, a lot of people tend to tell me that I'm too expensive, and they refuse to work with me. Now, I've been lucky and I'm very privileged, so I'm fine with that. So I would say, don't be afraid to say no if the pay isn't right for you. But at the same time, I understand that that isn't everyone's situation. So you really need to figure out what works for you. Even for one person, this what is a fair pay can vary from month to month. There have been months where I was really desperate and couldn't pay my bills, so I would take something that's even below my baseline. But like I said earlier, you need to, at the very least, be aware of the fact that you're getting ripped off when you get ripped off, so that the next time you can, when conditions are better, then you can negotiate for whatever your true worth is. Okay, final little bit of advice is to do the dirty work. A lot of writers tend to focus exclusively on the writing, and that's fine if you have a job as a writer, but as a freelancer, you are essentially running a small business. And as a small business owner, you need to get comfortable with a lot of annoying aspects of writing, which basically the business aspects of it. So one of the one of these aspects that I would strongly kind of recommend you to pay attention to is invoices and due dates. So when a publication publishes you, typically there is a lag between publication and payment that can vary anywhere between a month to 6 months. Some take even longer. So I really recommend filing an invoice on the day your piece goes out, it's published, and then ask them whatever their standard time period for clearing that payment is, and then really set a reminder for that due date, and the day it's due, send them an email, reminding them, asking them, where is my money? Because I mean, again, very practically speaking, how publications work is that once the story is commissioned and published, the freelance writer stops existing in the editor's mind. Especially at larger publications, that work of payment then passes on to another department, and it can get lost in that process. So it really helps if you're in the editor's face, kind of, for lack of a better phrase, reminding them that you exist, reminding them that you're owed money, remind them on the due date, and then if they don't, like, I'm expecting them to clear the payment immediately after that, but if they don't, send them another reminder in a week, another in another week. Being annoying and persistent like that is often the difference between an editor taking that 10 minutes in their day to go and hassle the accountant to clear your payment and not getting paid at all. So even though this is like really annoying work, which nobody wants to do, I really recommend making a system for it, putting calendar reminders, to-do lists, whatever works for you in order to make sure you do this. Another aspect to keep track of is deductible expenses. So this is one of the useful aspects of being a small business as a freelancer. If you spend any money in the process of doing your job, if you travel to write a story, or if you even if you have to interview a source and you have to end up buying them lunch, so those expenses are business expenses, and you can deduct them from your taxable income. So it's really hard to remember what all these expenses were at the end of the year when your tax filing is due. But if you keep track of them through the year, you could end up with a nice little annual bonus that you get back from the taxman. So yeah, that's really useful. Final bit of advice. This is a bit different from the rest of the presentation. It isn't particularly practical advice. It's more about an attitude that I personally would like to kind of vouch for or encourage. So basically, in freelance journalism, there is an information asymmetry that works against freelancers. Editors have all the information at their fingertips. They know how much every writer who writes for them is getting paid, and they might even know what other publications are paying, because editors talk to each other. But writers tend to keep their pay rates a secret. So when a new writer writes to a publication saying, I've got this great story, do you want to commission it? The editor can then be like, yeah, sure, but we only pay this much, even though they probably pay another writer, twice as much. And that process, that exploitation is only possible because we as freelance writers are so secretive about things like payment rates. So we need to break that information asymmetry in order to kind of get more power on our side. So, let's fight back by sharing information. Things like pricing, editors' contacts, even sources, if possible. I mean, you are the best judge of that, but if possible, I highly recommend sharing sources as well. Yeah, because basically freelancers tend to struggle because unlike in other jobs, we're all alone, and solving this core issue really fixes a lot of other problems that are an offshoot of it. So in my opinion, the key to freelancing is, and like kind of nailing it, is to build a community. It's to treat that community building, to treat making connections with other freelancers as a part of the job, as much a part of the job as the writing or the editing or the pitching. Yeah, that's my presentation. So I hope that was useful.
Yeah, lots of great advice. I think a lot of really good tips in there, and just information for especially a lot of new writers for whom everything can be very daunting and overwhelming. So yeah, thank you so much for that. We have a lot of questions, so I'll try to moderate and just break some things down. I think the most um, so at just one question I want to get out of the way, because it is about, a lot of people are asking about international publications. We're going to be doing a session really soon. We're actually recording it tomorrow, and we'll be hopefully uploading it by next week. And it's specifically about international publications. So just if you could hold on related to anything related to those questions for that session, that'll be really great. I'm hoping that that session will answer a lot of those questions. So questions for Visvak. The first is how, what kind of pay bands exist for freelancers and someone who feels that they've been underpaid a lot? So I think with Visvak, for the second they answered it with the ₹5 per word all the way to ₹10 per word is probably the most common for bigger publications. But Visvak, if you want to elaborate a little bit on that.
Sure. Yeah. So like I said, 10 rupees per word is the most I've ever been paid personally by an Indian publication. The lowest I've been paid is 60 paise per word. So there's a wide range. It's, again, like I said, it's up to you to figure out whether a particular piece, if you really want to write it, you might be willing to accept a lower rate for it. But if you're like you need to focus on the money at a particular point, then you might want to try and insist on getting to the higher price point, or shop it around to multiple publications until an editor can offer you that higher price point. But having said that, I have to say that also, like when I got into freelancing in 2018, 3 years ago, there was a kind of a boom in digital media at the time. So a lot of people were paying quite well. Right now, that market has totally crashed. So most publications are paying really badly. It's very rare to hear anyone paying anywhere close to that 10 rupees per word mark. So yeah.
And we've been collecting pay rates from different sources and trying to verify them. It's been a long process, but we're hoping to also release that pay rate document of different Indian publications. So even in that, there's a lot of publications that pay 2 rupees per word, 10 paise per word, and then all the way to 7, 8, 9. So yeah, you unfortunately, if you're just starting out, like this person's mentioned there, then it's gonna be a lot of really abysmal rates at the beginning, but hopefully you can build that up for yourself. Unlike Visvak, that talk to other freelancers so that you know with what to negotiate. So the next question, which is common question, is how detailed or innovative or unique should a pitch be?
Uh, well, I mean, obviously, it has to be as detailed. No, okay, detail. I'm going to get back to later, but innovative or unique. Well, as innovative as you or you as unique as you can make it. Detail, like I said, don't make it too long. Like I said, 200 words should be the ideal word length in which you convey the essence of your story, unless you can really justify it. Because essentially, think about the editor. There are 100 or more pitches in their inbox, and if you make it too long, then they're not going to get to the end of it, and you have less chance of um, getting your story commissioned. So the entire process of pitching, your goal should be, how can I make this as easy for the editor to say yes to this as possible? So yeah, try and put yourself in the editor's shoes as much as possible. And then the answer to that question would be would be easy to figure out.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that commonly happens is that there's some trending story or trending news item going, and so people kind of almost directly take that and put it in an email and like this, I want to write about this, but you're not actually saying what about that you want to write. There's a lot of people who want to write about that, but what would you bring that no one else can bring? So I think thinking about that for a minute would really help if you're trying to craft a pitch or your angle for a pitch. So one thing is how tolerant are, since you mentioned that you were an editor also, is how tolerant are editors of grammatical mistakes in pitches, and and how does one get better at that?
Okay, so grammatical errors in pitches. If the pitch is fantastic, I would probably ignore it. But if it's not like blowing my mind, then it becomes an automatic reason to think, okay, maybe this person's quality or attention to detail isn't great. So yeah, I mean, it should be obvious that if at all possible, really proofread your pitch like 5 times, 10 times, whatever. Make it as perfect as possible and avoid typos and grammatical errors and so on.
Yeah, the feeling that the editor like shouldn't get is that you were just walking, you're on your phone and you got an idea and you sent that as a pitch. That shouldn't be the feeling. You should like try to read your pitch at least 4-5 times. Try someone else, like Visvak mentioned, also try telling your pitch to someone else. Try getting someone else to read the pitch also to see if they can spot errors and things. So one question is what does your I'm not sure if you're freelancing now, but if when you were full-time freelancing, what's your regular day look like? What is that?
I don't think there's a regular day in a freelancer's life. Sorry?
It's a lot of irregular days.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, it completely varies. I think my big struggle when I was very actively pitching as a freelancer, I'm not so actively pitching now. I have a kind of a consistent gig which I'm working on. So when I was very actively pitching, my big struggle was knowing when I stopped working, because I was like we're all constantly scrolling social media or some timeline or the other, and it's very easy when for that scrolling to become work scrolling. So yeah, I really had no idea when I was working, when I was chilling, and that was a real problem, a problem which I'm still trying to solve. If you have any advice, I would love to hear that.
I turn off my phone. So very hard, but it's very difficult. But yeah, knowing when to stop working and setting work hours for yourself is extremely important. I don't recommend like 10, but the difficult part of that is you don't know when an idea is going to really form like creatively for you, and so that gets complicated. Like if you just happen to read something and that strikes an idea, it's difficult. But really trying to not like be 10 p.m. like still like frustrated over an email. I think that's important for people. Yeah. So one good question is, should you write a draft of your piece before you pitch to places?
Right. So this is more feasible for opinion analysis kind of pieces, because you don't really have to um, travel somewhere or reach out to people, make a connection, tell them, hey, I'm writing for this publication. For a reported piece, you have to do all these things. So for a reported piece, it may not be so feasible until you have a commission, you have the assurance of payment coming through. But if it's an opinion piece, if it's an analysis piece, if it's a personal essay, then it does become slightly feasible, especially if you have the time and you really definitely want to write this piece regardless of what anyone else thinks of it. Then sure, yeah, you can write it. It doesn't hurt you at all. I would say even if you've written the draft, it's still important to write that compressed mini version as a pitch, because that helps the editor make a decision in a quick way. You can tell them, hey, I've written the draft, but here's a brief. So read my brief, and if you love it, you can then, the piece is right there, and you don't have to wonder if I'll deliver. So that's a great 1-2 combo if you can, pull it off, if it's feasible for you.
Yeah. But and I would say though, don't tie yourself to that, because it might not be sustainable always. Like not every article you're going to have the time to draft completely before you send a pitch. And if you have drafted something, let yourself have the time and space to not go and edit it right away. You are not the editor. Like pitch first, get an editor who's commissioned it, and then you can return and work on it more. But yeah. So this is...
Sorry, one more thing I'd like to add to that question, which just occurred to me, is that so some occasions this could backfire on you, is that you could pitch to an editor and they might like the pitch but have a slightly different vision of how to treat it, in which case if you've written the entire piece already, then you are going to be dissatisfied, or the editor is going to be dissatisfied, or you're going to have to do double work. So that's also something to consider. So really, personally, I never write stuff before I have a commission. I do this for a living. I have to pay my bills. So I would not write until I'm guaranteed that the time I put into a piece is going to get me some money at the end of it. So yeah, that's a call you have to make for yourself as well.
For sure. So one person has asked, can you tell us which publications pay 10 rupees per word? That when we share our Excel of the pay rates, you'll be able to see that. Hopefully by this week that will be ready. But they're also asking, how does one pitch for a video series that you want to do, like a video series that you want to script and write? I'm not sure if you'll have any advice on that, but yeah, if you do.
Yeah, I don't think I am the right person to ask about that, but just from the general sense that I have, video is something that publications don't tend to outsource. They typically tend to do it in-house, or you make the entire video yourself and send it to them and say, hey, do you want to write an article around this, or do you want to plug it? That's one way. But I am not really, maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think publications tend to commission videos in the same way they commission articles, where you pitch to them and then they say, cool, here, take the money and go make the video. Yeah, I might be wrong on this.
Yeah, so this person's asked specifically for like BBC traveler content. Yeah, I'm not sure if they commission it. There are video houses and video publications that do commission videos and like film related things specifically, but reported videos, I'm not sure. Yeah, like Visvak said, you might have to really make the whole thing. Or you can, if you have an extraordinary sort of experience in video production, then sending them that as a way to be like, I'm experienced enough to pull this off. But yeah, I'm not sure. We'll keep that in mind though if there's ever any session on video scripting specifically. So one question's in, how do you, I mean, it's a common question for writers in general, but how do you deal with the rejection and the overwork that comes with this? And
I think you got muted.
Hello, sorry, I think I know. So the person's asking, how do you get over the trap of thinking that your idea is crap? It's definitely not crap. I just want to like let that person know. Idea is wonderful. But yeah, Visvak, if you could take that up.
Yeah, this is a really difficult one. I mean, yeah, rejection, how do you deal with that? I don't have a good answer. You just have to like try and let yourself, try and tell yourself that the editor's opinion of the piece does not reflect, the value of the piece and also your personal self-worth. I know it's easier that, I mean, as I say this, I'm not convinced by it because it's very easy to say, but very hard to implement. So one maybe practical way to deal with this is that there is a hierarchy when it comes to publications. So for example, when I was trying to pitch to international publications, they have A, higher standards, but also B, they have like, very specific expectations based on their audience's demands. So it's very hard for Indian writers to kind of crack those international publications. So typically Indian freelancers who are pitching to international publications, they experience a lot of rejection. So I experienced this as well. And consistently, like for a 6-month period, I was just sending out pitches and like getting rejected. So a practical way to kind of deal with that is to maybe go slightly lower down on the hierarchy. Okay, it didn't work with the international publication. Let me try maybe like a top tier Indian publication. Maybe, okay, let me go to a slightly lower rung Indian publication. Maybe let me go to like a publication which is saying, we'll take like entry level writing. We won't pay much or something like that, like maybe lower the expectations on that piece and try and get it published somewhere rather than, remaining rigid that it has to go either in this publication or in this specific type of publication. So that kind of helped for me. The pieces that were getting rejected consistently internationally, I was able to place them elsewhere, and that was able to show me rather than me telling myself that piece had value. It was just not for those editors.
Yeah, and I think this might sound extremely cheesy, but at the end of the day, if it's coming from an honest place and a sincere place that you want to pursue the story, it's not a crap idea piece. Like it's worth pursuing for yourself as a writer. I think like if you really do believe in that pitch and that story, then yeah, just know that it's the industry that there's a lot of flaws with, not with you. So, and this person has also asked, how do I convince publications to take a chance on me if my profile is virtually non-existent? I think that's where you have to really refine your pitch, and you have to really work on, making sure your pitch stands out, making sure that your voice is heard in your pitch itself. Like it shouldn't sound like a generic pitch. It shouldn't sound like a pitch you copy pasted for a lot of publications. It should sound like something that really conveys to the publication that not only is this pitch really unique, but you are the right person to share it with the world. So yeah, but if you have any other advice for that.
Yeah, couple of things I want to say. 1 second. So I've pasted a link in the chat. That's like a bunch of resources that I've just been compiling, copy pasting from various places over the years. So that might be useful. One of the things in that link is that I've linked to in that document that is there is a pitch clinic that the Guardian US editor, she has a blog which she calls a pitch clinic, where she basically looks at pitches and says, this is what worked for me, this is what didn't. I really gained a lot from reading things like that. There are a lot of other resources there as well, might be useful to check out. So another thing that you can do when you're starting out, apart from like making a pitch really perfect, is to slowly build a portfolio. Goes back to what I was saying earlier, that there is a hierarchy of publications. So when you're starting out, going for the most prestigious publication is going to be hard, regardless of how good your pitch is. So maybe start with a publication with a slightly lower bar, which is willing to publish amateur or semi-amateur writing. Maybe the pay is bad, but you have to build a portfolio of 3-4 pieces, and then you have something to show for yourself. So that I think is useful, because as an editor, unless you're really going to knock the pitch out of the stadium, it's helpful to see a history of writing, and to build that with publications with slightly lower bars is something that you can aim to do.
Yeah. In relation to that, I think one person's asked, what do you think about publishing yourself on self-published places like The Artifice? I'm guessing the question is like big places that don't pay at all. So one thing I just want to say to that is I have a soft spot for passion projects. If there's like a small collective, a small little magazine that's very niche based and that you find yourself really interested in that niche, then I think it should be very there. It shouldn't be what you primarily spend all your energy on, but it is nice to sort of work with them and collaborate with them and put your piece out there, even if you're not seeing any money in that, because I think that the room you get for experimentation and the fact that you're really getting to write everything that you want to write about, hopefully is worth that a bit. But I don't think it should be I don't think it should be a habit. I don't think you should make that your primary way of writing.
Yeah, and my opinion goes back to the previous answer. I said that these kind of places are very useful to build an initial portfolio in order to convince like slightly bigger places that you're worth their time.
Yeah, and you get to make mistakes in these kinds of publications that you wouldn't get to make in bigger ways, and that's also a way of learning. So I think it helps in those ways. But yeah, after a point, I think if you're finding yourself doing like 4 free articles like every month or something, then that's not the best way to work it out, I think. But sorry, just a few. We'll take only a few more questions because I think it's gotten a long time, and Visvak has busy schedule that he's taken time out of.
No, actually, it's fine. I can go on. It's cool.
Okay. So there's one really interesting question is if my pitch involves interviewing someone and about their work or about them, do I approach them first and have an assurity of the interview, or do I submit the pitch first and later approach the interview?
Okay, again, tricky question. You could do it both ways. So it all depends on the kind of person you're talking about. So if it's a government official, right, typically they're not going to talk to random freelancers, and it really helps to get a commission so that you can go back to them and say, hey, I'm writing a piece for XYZ, and that's why I want to talk to you, and then they'll give you the time of the day. If it's someone, so interviews tend to be, broadly, I think you could classify it into 2 types. One is where you're like showcasing someone, it's like a positive, you're not trying to like catch them out, you're not trying to like do a gotcha on them. So like an artist, a filmmaker, scientist, writer, thinker, whatever. So these kind of people, they tend to want to talk, they want attention, they want publicity, so
they want exposure.
yeah. So I think with those kind of people, it might be safe to assume that they will talk to you, so you can pitch a piece. Of course, you have to do some work in that pitch. You can't just say, hey, I'm going to talk to this person. You have to talk about why it's relevant, what you're going to talk to them about, what kind of aspects of their work that you'll bring out all of that. So I think it's safe to assume that they will talk to you. But so cases in which it helps to talk to the source beforehand would be, your this is specifically kind of reported stories where the story itself is reliant on some source, that you've figured out, right? So I was doing a story on like uh, illegal constructions along the coast in Goa, and the key to that story was this activist that I was talking to. Without the activist, I had no story. So obviously, I had to do a pre-interview with the activist where I kind of got like the basics enough to write a pitch. And what that also gives me is that I have the pitch I've got out of the activist, but I've also got her name, which I can then put into the pitch and say, she is so and so. She's legit because she works for this NGO, and I've already spoken to her, and that increases the credibility of my story. So yeah, it really depends on who the person is and what kind of story you're doing. Whether you're able to talk to them before or after.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't have much more to add to that. So one question is a more technical question, and it's about how to account for tax deductions when negotiating, and how do you bring it up with the editor?
No, okay. So the tax deduction thing isn't something the editor gets involved in at all. The only thing you can talk to the editor about is whether they can cover expenses or not. So if you're traveling to do a story, then you can ask them to pay you a travel budget, which should include not just the travel in terms of transport, but should also include, like whatever you need to stay there, should include food. I'm saying should, but like almost nobody pays these travel budgets.
We never eat.
Yeah. So that's what you would typically talk to an editor about. The tax part of it is something you handle entirely by yourself. So yeah, if they've given you a travel budget and your expenses are being paid from that, then you have nothing to deduct. But if you're paying out of your own pocket to travel somewhere to write a story, save the bill. Save the bill for proof, but most likely, freelancers are not making enough money that the taxman is going to demand proof. But yeah, definitely record the amount. And at the end of the year, you can add up all those amounts and then kind of reduce that where applicable from your taxable amount. I am not an accountant. Please talk to an accountant about this stuff.
Yeah, we'll definitely set up another session just about finances and accounts, because I am also know very little about the technical aspects of it. So one question is, hi, thanks so much for this session. You're welcome. Thank you for being here. In case you have any tips on pitching law, human rights type pieces, where or who would be paid? So Leaflet accepts pitches. Leaflet India, they have a Twitter account also, and they pay a flat rate of 3,000 rupees per piece. Article 14 also accepts pitches. We've heard a pay rate from them. I can't remember it though, and I've not been verified yet. But once the document comes out, we'll share that. But yeah, Article 14 also I think accepts pitches. Article-14.com, I think, is their website. But there are a few publications. I don't know if you know any off the top of your head. But yeah, there are places where you can definitely pitch to.
Wire is an obvious one, but they pay very badly. I think Article 14 pays very well. I haven't written for them, but I've heard they might be in the 10 rupees per word range. Maybe. Don't quote me on that.
Remembering 7 per word, but 7 to 10, yeah, I think they're definitely one of the better ones that I've heard
of. And they pay travel. Yes, this I've heard.
Yeah. Yeah, and also scroll and wire, like if you can keep the legalese to a little bit of a minimum, or at least take on the effort of explaining some of the terminology if you're using any, then most places I think you can definitely pitch an article. Someone saying first post also pays well, 8.5 per word. You'll hear more about this in our document. um, so um,
In India, Spend is another good place.
yeah,
They
India.
they tend to be focused on data, but if you can use data to build a story about human rights, then yeah, it's a great place. They pay well, they pay travel, all that good stuff.
Yeah. So how do you deal with publications taking a long time to pay? So I've heard stories of everywhere from 1 month to 1 year of non-payment. So yeah, it's definitely a tough. If this wasn't a COVID time, I would suggest literally going to the office and sitting there if that's possible, because you need your money. You should not at any point, like Visvak said over and over again in the presentation, don't feel shameless for emailing. Someone in the chat mentioned, an attendee mentioned that if they were frequent enough during editing, then they should be frequent enough during paying. So yeah, I think don't feel bad about, like, it's your money, you earned that money, you should totally email again and again. But a lot of things happen sometimes even out of the editor's control. It's not really the editor who controls it every time. So some things do happen that complicate it, but yeah, you should follow up for sure.
Yeah, just keep on following up, and yeah, don't burn the bridge. Don't go ballistic until it gets really bad, so that you can keep following up. Just keep sending them a standard email reminding them.
Yeah.
Also, one like practical piece of advice that I figured out from bad experiences is that when you start writing for a new publication, um, don't write multiple pieces for them straight off the bat. Wait until you get paid for one. Figure out what their payment process is like. Do they pay on time? Whatever time they say. Do they make you run around? So once you understand that, then try and pitch the second piece or the third piece. Don't like do 5 pieces and then you're stuck waiting for all those payments.
Yeah, and definitely, like, not trying to downplay it at all. It's a bitter experience if you actually end up not being paid at all, and it does happen, even if it is rare or whatever. Especially now, I've been hearing a lot more stories about that during the pandemic because the industry is suffering. But yeah, I don't know how to, like, someone asks how to deal with that. I don't know how to deal with that. I just eat chocolates or something. Like, I don't know how else to, what you will do if there's nothing from their end.
Yeah,
But
this is something again about, like, goes back to that information asymmetry point. If we knew every time a publication burns a writer, then we would be more cautious about approaching them. So yeah, I mean, we should share this information more. If you're not comfortable putting it out publicly on social media, then at least put it out among whoever freelancer friends you have. Ask them to spread the word.
yeah,
Make it travel that this publication doesn't pay. So
yeah. Please feel free to message us on Twitter also. We're more than happy to take those remarks into consideration when we're making this document, because there are serial non-payers in the industry. Um, how soon can you renegotiate rates with the publication that you have already written for a couple of times?
uh, yeah, this I don't think I've ever done this actually. I don't think publications are particularly receptive to renegotiation,
Mm,
because that involves them admitting that they underpaid you in the first place, which they are very unlikely to do. Uh,
yeah.
so I don't really have much advice to offer here.
Yeah, I've taken on the risk a few times and it's paid off well. Like, I think I wrote two pieces for a publication, and then for the third piece, I was like, oh, why not we try this read or something? And it actually did work out. Like, it's still yeah, you have to think about if this publication, like, you have to feel it out essentially with the editor. If you, especially if you have a close working relationship with the editor, it is possible, but yeah, it's rare. But yeah, think about if that's the risk that you want to take, especially if you're a completely new writer and you don't have a lot of bylines and things, then think about it. But I don't think it's entirely a bad idea. You just have to be careful.
Yeah, I mean, you can ask, what's the worst that could happen?
Yeah. Yeah. Um, so I so everyone's thanking you, by the way. Just so you thank you for some just wanted to let you know. It, is it important to have a portfolio before I pitch for the first time? Will not having one affect my chances to getting accepted? I think Visvak a little bit answered this with the, you keep going lower in the rung of like the hierarchy of publications. But no, I started out with a zero, like I didn't have any articles before I started pitching. So yeah, it's you have to think about which publication will be ready to accept your pitch and how good your pitch is. And I think it would work out. Do publications in India pay a kill fee? And also, if you can explain kill fee, because even I didn't know this like up until 6 months ago that this something like this exists also.
Okay, no, I don't know any publications in India that pay a kill fee. I used to pay them at BuzzFeed India, but again, BuzzFeed India is a international publication. So basically, the idea of a kill fee emerges from the concept of a contract, which no Indian publication has heard of. So basically, yeah, a kill fee is when a publication commissions a story. You sign a contract saying, cool, I will deliver this story, these are the terms, yada yada, and then they back out and say we don't want the story anymore. Then they have to pay a certain percentage of the agreed on fee, a smaller amount, for backing out. So yeah, all of that is dependent on a contract existing in the first place. And in India, we're not even able to get our payments for publications that, I mean, stories that have already been published.
Yeah,
So
you can get your live feed and kill fees like ages away. But it should be part of the practice. But yeah, it's not. I also haven't heard of any Indian publications paying it, and also very few American publications I've heard of actually committing to paying it, even if they have said that they would pay it. But yeah, and someone's asked in relation to fees and all this, should you ask for a proportion of the amount in advance? Which is very interesting.
I mean, I don't think any publication does
Yeah,
that.
I'm sorry. It would be great. It would be ideal, but it would be actually ideal if you get paid the whole thing when you submit the first draft itself. But no, it's not. Not. I've never heard that. You usually get paid way after it's been published, unless you've gotten a stipend or something for some work related to the piece that you're doing. Sometimes I've heard people get that, but yeah, other than that, no. It's reimbursements and post publication mostly.
If you
Um,
absolutely need to get paid in advance, the way to perhaps go about it is to look for fellowships or grants which can enable that kind of story. And so you get paid by the fellowship, and then pitching becomes the secondary thing. You get paid again by the publication, but the fellowship has already paid you. So that's useful for stories where you need to do advanced research, and that's going to cost time and money.
yeah. Um, three more questions we'll take, guys. Really sorry. If there's any question that you feel like we not addressed, and or if you think of anything, please just email or message us, and we can, ask this work later, or just like think about it more and get back to you for sure. We won't leave anyone hanging. But last three questions. So the first is very specific question is what are the typical things to account for in a budget submission for a story that needs 6 months to a year of reporting?
Okay, typical things to account for. I mean, is that the only story you're going to be working on for 6 months? I mean, this needs a lot of specifics. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I'm not really sure if how I'd answer that. Yeah, but if it is the only story you're going to be working on, then yeah, I guess you need to account for your living costs, which, I mean, I don't know which publication would pay 6 months worth of living costs at
Yeah.
all. So
Yeah.
I think this question would really need kind of specifics
Yeah,
to answer.
but whoever's asked this, please email us like a detailed thing. We can try and figure it out. One thing is, do we also include equipment? So I, it's very, it's been, if as someone who's also done video production work, it's been really rare that a place has paid for equipment. They usually expect you to already just magically have it, but it wouldn't be a bad idea to try and see if that's something you can get at least some costs mitigated for by the publication that you are working for, especially if it is the length of the time that you're saying, 6 months to a year. So yeah, definitely talk about that, but travel for sure, would be one thing. But yeah, please message us. One small question that someone's asked: does BuzzFeed India still accept essay pitches? Because I guess you mentioned BuzzFeed and all this.
No, I don't think they do. I don't really follow them anymore, so I'm not super sure. But my I think they don't. They basically killed off the essay section, when I left.
Okay. So last two questions, guys. First is, what is the approximate time most organizations, publications offer to work on your story, like offer for you to work on your story after they've been approved, even if it includes ground reporting and other things? What's the time frame, I guess, before approval and then first draft?
Okay, that I mean, I don't think there's a fixed amount of time there. It would definitely completely vary depending on the editor's bandwidth and like how much of a priority they think your story is. So yeah, it could really vary from few days to a few months. Definitely don't let it get to a few months, unless there's a good reason or great pay. Uh, yeah, if they're delaying that long, just pull out and take it to another publication.
Yeah, yeah. Someone asked what proportion of the story should be worked upon before pitching. So we've answered it before. If you missed it, then watch the recording of the event. We've already answered this question at the beginning of the Q&A. But yeah, one thing I think I want to add to that is, don't, like, if you have an idea, don't try to just write a paragraph about it and send it right away to places. Give yourself time to really think about it, to think about what are the what, and I would also suggest reading up on what you're pitching, because it's likely that a lot of things that you are trying to say might have already been published somewhere before. So you need to read up on the pitch that you're making, or what articles already exist out there about, in relation to your pitch or in relation to the field that you're like pitching in, if it's a science piece or whatever it may be. So read up a little on that and then try to see if there's anything new that you can offer the publication, and then hone your pitch and send it in. I've personally, Visvak mentioned that he's never made a full draft before pitching. I've personally never done that, but you do put in thought and effort into like really covering all your bases with regards to a pitch. So last question, as in, as an engineering and sorry, just so everyone knows again, because there's new questions about pay rates and all, we'll put out a document once it's fully verified. You'll get to know all the lowest paying publications and the better paying publications, so don't worry, that's coming. So as an engineering graduate, it's a really tough market out there to write for publications, because they generally give preference to people who studied writing. How to pitch or convince the editor in this circumstance? Yeah.
Okay. I don't think publications really care about what you've
Yeah.
studied, to be honest.
Yeah. They
It's
give you the side of the non-engineers. They don't care about what we've studied and all. Really the low rate of care. But yeah, continue. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. As like when I was an editor, I definitely had no idea what anyone I was commissioning had studied. So the background is irrelevant. In fact, it could be an advantage if you want to write about things that like technology, for example. You could say, I'm an engineering graduate, so I understand how this stuff works, so I can talk about the technicals better than some media studies student or something like that. So yeah, you can use it to your advantage, and it's just about crafting a good pitch and getting the story right. uh, your your degree doesn't matter.
Yeah, because I was an actual media studies student, so I know you're right. They probably know more. But yeah, play to your strengths. Play to your strengths. Like I know people who've been working in like fields like demography or statistics or something for decades, but now they feel like writing and they're getting commission because they're playing to their strengths. They're writing about this vast experience, the body of knowledge that they already have. So I'm not saying you need to be like 50 years old before you start writing, but yeah, play to your strengths. Think about like what you've learned, what you can give to this publication that they wouldn't get from any other writer. It's the similar line for just non-engineers on just proper like people who've studied writing or something like that. It's the same. You need to play to your strengths and really focus on what you can bring to the publication. um so someone's asked, can you have a panel on fellowships or grants? Yeah, okay, we will definitely put that. If you can message us all of this, because I don't think I'll remember, but we'll definitely have more sessions on things that you guys want to talk about. But yeah, I don't see any more questions. Visvak, do you have any last thoughts or anything that you're thinking of want to add to the
No last thoughts. There are a couple of questions. Does all this hold true for print publications? Yes. Would a personal essay be combined with an interview of some person's work? Yes. Okay. So two more questions handled.
yeah. Um yeah, we does it hold merit for print publications? I'm so sorry. I don't personally know, like I don't have any experience with print publications, so I can't answer that. Um, is there, oh, this might actually, sorry, just to put, is there any difference in pitching for a series of articles as opposed to pitching for just one short article?
Yeah, 100%. Of course, there is a difference because you're asking the editor to commit to like a huge project with you. It's definitely not going to happen if you don't either already have some kind of stellar reputation, or you don't have some kind of equation with the editor already. So yeah, I would suggest first pitching one story and then try to expand on that.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you so much, Visvak, for joining. If you have any last thoughts, you can share. But yeah, I think we'll try to.
I am all out of thoughts. I hope it was useful to everyone.
Yeah, me too. Someone said, can Freelance Writers India help build a community for new writers? We're a very small group of like friends, but we're trying to do more things. But I think it's very difficult to connect with other writers. I understand that, but yeah, try to find. I know one writers group that just started off of Twitter. If you want, please DM us. We'll try to send you links to things. But right now, we don't have like sort of a connecting space or networking hosting space that we can sort of commit to in terms of time and dedication and all of that. But yeah, we'll definitely try to see if we can work towards that. But thank you everyone for joining today again. Thank you Hubly Events for coordinating the webinar, and thank you so much Visvak for giving us time and a lot of good advice. Um, yeah, we'll be recording a session on international publications specifically tomorrow, and hopefully that'll be up next week. And we'll try to put up this recording of Visvak session today in a bit. So yeah, thank you everyone. Thanks Visvak.
Thank you all. Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Bye.